It was in 2016 that Apple announced it would be ditching the headphone jack.
It really comes down to one word: courage.
And for the smartphone industry, it was the shot heard round the world.
There are several reasons why Apple removed the headphone jack from the iPhone 7, and surprisingly, courage is not one of them.
Samsung also just removed the decades-old technology from its phones, even though it took every opportunity to ridicule Apple for the headphone jack's removal in the past.
Do you want to know what else it comes with? An audio jack. I'm just saying.
With the launch of the Galaxy Note 10 in August of 2019, Samsung ditched the jack too.
Samsung was definitely one of those companies that criticized the rest of the industry for not having headphone jacks and conveniently forgot to mention that they got rid of it in their newest Note 10.
The headphone jack has been around for more than 100 years, so why are companies increasingly removing them from our phones?
It wasn't a pro-customer move. It was a way for them to make more money.
Let's start with a brief history of the components needed to make mobile music what it is today, starting with the beloved audio jack. The grandparent to the standard 3.5mm jack, the quarter-inch jack, was used all the way back in the late 1800s by switchboard operators. The larger jack continued its reign until the 1970s when Sony released the Walkman, the first widely available mobile music device. The Walkman was also the first successful commercial example of the same 3.5mm jack we use today. An obvious next step was the rise of the Mp3 and the Mp3 Player, popularized by Apple's iPod. It was 2001 when Steve Jobs took the stage to announce the iPod.
This amazing little device holds 1,000 songs, and it goes right in my pocket.
The Simmons SL45 was released in 2001 and was the first phone that was also a mobile music device, and that set off a trend in the mobile world. Music was now a must. But the SL45 was not the first phone with the headphone jack.
My first phone was a Nokia 3310, and that had a headphone jack. Back then, there wasn't really any wireless communication standard that was acceptable enough to do good headset phone calls. So it was kind of born out of a necessity to deliver high quality, headset calls.
By the mid-2000s, there were many phones that could also play music, but were still limited by storage and battery life. Bluetooth grew in popularity around the same time, and that spelled the beginning of the end for the headphone jack, now that wireless listening was possible. While wired headphones may seem antiquated, most audiophiles prefer the sound quality from this analog port.
The reason why you want to go wired over wireless is that compression that you get over Bluetooth. All the Bluetooth standards, for the most part, have some kind of compression, which then affects the actual quality of the audio.
But that wire can be really frustrating, especially when you're working out or need mobility.
Most of the time when I use headphones, I'm at the gym and I have wireless headphones. I mean, it's not that important to me. But the few times that I do need wired headphones, like when I'm traveling or something like that, it is super inconvenient not to have a headphone jack.
And while Bluetooth technology has come a long way, it still has its pitfalls.
Bluetooth sucks right now, but the optimist in me hopes that removing the headphone jack will act as a springboard for companies to work harder at integrating Bluetooth and wireless audio technology.
Most cars have Bluetooth audio, but a lot of people, only cars within the last 5 years, cars before that just have the aux cord that you plug into,
So why did Apple decide to remove the jack from the iPhone 7?
Maintaining an ancient single-purpose analog big connector doesn't make sense because that space is at a premium.
It's the mental shift that, flagships have had for the last couple of years. It's not a flagship unless the headphone jack is gone. And that's kind of, Apple's fault. Premium phones are now associated with no headphone jacks.
See, there's not a whole lot of space inside of a smartphone. Tech companies have crammed more and more into that incredibly limited space, and when something becomes antiquated, it's got to go, making the phones thinner and allowing for other components.
The thickest part of the phone is that headphone jack.
I think it was a decision of, okay, we have to use this space for other components because we've used so much of the phone's overall size as screen that we just don't have room for other components in other places, and we have to get rid of the headphone jack.
The removal of the headphone jack also helped the iPhone 7 receive its IP67 water-resistant rating. So there were some good reasons behind its removal.
As much as I do appreciate being able to plug in a pair of headphones and just have them work out of the box, I also appreciate engineering in the technological space.
Most companies have been moving away from the headphone jack, partially because a lot of the wireless capabilities of earbuds today have gotten much better. The quality is not perfect yet. There's still lots of room for improvement, but I think for most people it's pretty good and it satisfies their needs.
But some folks don't agree that the headphone jack had to go at all.
When you're designing the circuit boards and stuff like that, you can make as much room as you want. I mean, I've taken apart phones that have like projectors inside of them. And so if there's room for a projector, or if there's room for an S Pen, you know, there's room for a headphone jack.
You could look at any teardown that doesn't have a headphone jack and say, oh yeah, there's no way that there could be room in there. But then you look at a teardown of a phone with a headphone jack and it's there.
This choice to leave off the audio jack came simultaneously with the announcement of Apple's $159 AirPods, which called into question Apple's real motives behind the exclusion.
Personally, I do think that it was monetarily motivated, at least in some way.
It wasn't a coincidence that they released the AirPods at the same time they took away the headphone jack. It was something that wasn't making them money, so they got rid of it so people would buy the AirPods.
Not to mention the fact that the Lightning port is a proprietary connector, meaning companies have to pay Apple just to make a compatible device.
Apple charges a fee to license their Lightning port. They can get more money if you have to make a Lightning accessory, whereas the 3.5mm jack just anybody can make.
I think you're going to be people scrambling to license it, and if they can't afford that Apple license, essentially there's going to be headsets that work well with iPhones, and there's going to be headsets that don't work well.
And when Apple kills something, it usually creates a domino effect in the tech world.
They removed the floppy drive, they removed the CD-ROM drive from their Macs, and people went crazy, right? But people kept buying the devices, and their competitors, quite frankly, followed their direction only 2 or 3 years later.
So slowly, other larger companies started to follow suit. But Samsung kept its grip on the audio jack.
Whether you're listening to the S9's amazing new speakers or on your own pair of headphones, by simply connecting them to the convenient headphone socket at the bottom of the device.
Can I still use these headphones with the tiered?
Yeah, but you'll need an adapter, or as most people like to call it, a dongle.
A what?
But with its most recent phone release, Samsung finally left out the headphone jack without mentioning anything during the keynote about why it left it out, and even took down some content that challenged Apple's decision.
If you are going to take such a solid stance against Apple for not putting a headphone jack in the phone, at least own up to it, I feel like, in the moment, you know?
There could have been a story where this is the best, most compact device we can make. There's some compromises. If you don't like it, we have a bigger version for you. And if you don't like either, you can still get an S10. But the fact that they didn't even address it was a little bit not great.
Samsung did tell CNBC it removed the headphone jack to make more room for its powerful battery. There are still some brands like LG that find the space for a headphone jack, whether it be for its audiophile customers or its customers who don't want to or can't afford the switch.
In other markets like China and India, the headphone jack and actually micro USB are still important because people can't get rid of their old chargers or can't afford them.
Luckily for those who want to keep their headphones, many of the big phone makers are coming out with lower-cost models of their flagship phones, like the Google 3A and 3A XL, which include a headphone jack.
There's still a considerable amount of people that want the headphone jack because they can't afford, wireless earbuds that are good.
There are so many awesome phones at the $500 level that still have the headphone jack, because people who are buying cheaper phones probably don't have an extra, $100, $200 to throw down on some wireless headphones. But those $500 phones they do 95% of what a $1,000 phone does.
Like it or not, it looks like the headphone jack is gone for good when it comes to the top-end flagship phones.
I think they are going for the portless phone, and they won't stop until they get there.
In fact, some speculate we might not even get buttons in a few years.
There's no fingerprint sensor, no buttons, and, charges wirelessly, so it might even be, no more USB port.
So, what can you do?
You can go spend $1,000 every year if you really want to, but you're not getting a return on that $1,000. A $500 phone is more than enough for the average person. And whether it has a headphone jack or not, I would just say, use your phone as long as possible because there's no reason to upgrade, which is kind of strange from a tech reviewer who makes a living doing cell phones.